A number of spiritual traditions teach that if you want to find God or holiness or truth, you don't need to climb a mountain somewhere or visit some far-off shrine or even follow a guru from an exotic land. All you have to do is look within yourself and be right where you are, and you'll find everything you need. As the Buddhist teacher Shen Hui put it, friends, each of you has the nature of a Buddha. Bodhisattvas don't hand out the Buddha nature to you. For all you and all beings are from the beginning in nirvana. From the beginning you are endowed with a gift of pure wisdom. Why don't you recognize this fact? And the Hindu Upanishads say, you could have a golden treasure buried beneath your feet and walk over it again and again, yet never find it. Just so, all beings live every moment in the divine city. And the Sikhs say, why do you go to the forest in search of the divine? God abides in you as fragrance dwells in a flower. Look therefore in your own heart. And of course, the Gospels have Jesus saying the kingdom of God is within you. What all these traditions seem to be saying is, it's all here. It's in you. You need look no further because the answers you need, you already have. Isn't that a great idea? Don't you find that kind of an appealing concept? And yet, if it's really true that God or holiness or truth, beauty, goodness, whatever you want to call it, if it's true that it's really right here in us, how come most of us don't seem to find it so easily? I mean, if it's really that simple, as the Roman Stoic Marcus Aurelius put it, look within you. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig. Or Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, without stepping outside your door, you can understand the world. Without looking out your window, you can see the ways of heaven. The farther you travel, the less you understand. Or Rumi's Tabrisi, leaving the desert, made a pilgrimage to his own home and found that it was a temple. Okay, if that's true, why do we keep stepping outside our door, looking for truth somewhere else? Why do we need to search at all? Who needs religion anyway? Shouldn't we just give it up and say, I don't need to learn anything new. I know everything I need to know already. I am the treasure. I am the bubbling fountain of good. That's what all these spiritual traditions are telling me, so why should I bother following any of them? And the answer, I think, is that yes, it's all here, and it's in you. But you can't find it until you get away from here and go outside yourself. You can't see it from where you are. You got to get some distance. It's kind of like the guy visiting New York City who wanted to see the Empire State Building. So he got to the front of the building but didn't realize he was there. And he asked someone in front of the building, I'd like to see the Empire State Building. Can you show me where it is? You know, he's right there. And the guy says, you want to see the Empire State Building? And he says, yeah, I came to New York just so I could see what it looks like. I got to see it while I'm here. And the other guy said, well, if you want to see what the Empire State Building looks like, here's what you do. You walk that way about 30 blocks, and then you turn around and look back, and you'll see it. You know that old expression, you can't get there from here? Well, the point of my talk this morning is you can't even get here from here. You got to go there to really get to here. And let me give you a few examples of what I mean. Consider American culture. A teacher friend of mine once told me that she couldn't understand why so many Hispanic kids in her class seemed so disrespectful. When she would talk to a child, the kid would often just look at the floor and appear to not be paying any attention. And she'd say, look at me when I'm talking to you. But then she found out that in some Hispanic cultures, it's considered rude to make direct eye contact with someone in authority. It amounts to staring belligerently. Better to keep your eyes down and show respect. And her learning this didn't just help her understand a child from a different culture. It actually helped her look at her own culture and see what assumptions she always made without thinking. It's like the cartoon of a fish that's taken out of its fish bowl And when it's put back in, it says to a friend, "All this time we've been thrashing around in water. Who knew?" Exactly. You don't know where you are till you get away from where you are. You don't see what's right in front of you until you look behind you or to the side, or maybe outside the bowl altogether. Or take religion. You can grow up in a Western religion like Judaism or Christianity and learn quite a bit about your particular version of it. But if you step outside your religion for a bit and study some others, then when you come back to your tradition, you may know it in a new way. I saw this happen with some Christians who studied the Vedanta form of Hinduism. This is when I was on my first sabbatical back in 1984, and I went to a Vedanta center, retreat center in California. And Vedanta was intriguing to these Christians, so they studied it, and they discovered that today's Vedanta Hindus really admire Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. They admire it because they think it shows a beautiful example of overcoming greed and hatred and other obstacles to enlightenment. And they see Jesus as a great Hindu master. So when these Christians learned how Hindus saw Jesus, they were able to go back to Jesus themselves and see him in a way that had never been possible before. And in fact, that's what happened to Gandhi. His study of Christianity made him a better Hindu. And of course, Martin Luther King's study of that particular Hindu, Gandhi, made him a better Christian. I once heard a Catholic psychiatrist giving a talk about meditation and other spiritual practices. And he said he learned about meditation by studying Eastern religions, like Buddhism and Hinduism. But he eventually found out that these same spiritual practices existed in his own Catholic heritage, only he hadn't known about them before, because they weren't very widespread. So he's now exploring Christian mysticism. But the point is, he discovered this Christian path by stepping outside the path. Or consider religious mythology. When you study the birth stories of Buddha and Krishna and Abraham, Moses, Muhammad, Lao Tzu, Confucius, you see how many similarities they all have, with angels and wise men and virgin births and miracles and stars leading the way. And then you come back to the Christian story with a new understanding of the layers of meaning and metaphor behind it. Speaking of learning from other religions, I remember a friend of mine was talking to a Hindu, and he said, why do you not, why are cows sacred? Why don't you eat sacred, eat beef, And the Hindu said, well, in India we have our sacred cows. In America you have your sacred cats and dogs. You even sleep with them, but you wouldn't think of eating them. And it kind of put a whole new light on it. And if you don't mind for a little joke, there's a story about a Hindu, a Jewish person, and a Unitarian Universalist are on their way to an interfaith conference. And they're driving in the car, and this is the days before cell phones. And their car breaks down, and it's kind of late at night. They don't know what to do. They see a light up at the hill, and they walk up to it, and there's a farmer living there, and they explain their situation. And the farmer says, well, we do have a place not too far to get your car, but you have to do that in the morning. Meanwhile, you can stay overnight at my place. And he said, I have a guest room set up. He said, the only problem is there's only 2 beds, so 2 of you can sleep here, but if one of you doesn't mind, you can sleep in the barn. And so they said, okay, well, that's fine. And they decided the Jewish person decides to go sleep in the barn. And he goes out in the barn, and the Unitarian and the Hindu get into bed and get ready. And a little later, they hear a knock at the door, and they open it up, and there's the Jewish person who says, I'm sorry, I thought I could sleep in the barn, but there are pigs there, and that's an unclean animal for me. I just really feel uncomfortable sleeping there. And so the Hindu says, well, that's fine, I'll go sleep in the barn. So the Hindu goes out, and the Jew and the Unitarian go to bed. And a little later, there's a knock at the door. They open it up, and the Hindu says, I thought I could sleep, but there are gods in here. You know, in my religion, we think that cows are divine, and I just feel uncomfortable sleeping there. And the Unitarian Universalist said, well, that's fine, I'll go sleep out there, and goes out. A little bit later, there's a knock at the door, and they open it up, the door, and it's the cow and the pig. You can forget everything after that if you want, but when you think about how much you can learn from people outside your world, it's very interesting. I mean, isn't that why, for example, we learn so much from children? It's not that they help us, not just that they help us see their world, but they help us take another look at our world and the assumptions behind it. I read about a woman who was taking a trip one summer evening with her 3 young children in the car, and just ahead of them on the road was a convertible with its top down, and in that car was a woman standing up, stark naked, and waving. And just as this mother was reeling from the shock, she heard her 5-year-old say, Mom, that lady isn't wearing a seatbelt. What a fresh perspective. I also heard about a first grade teacher who was reading the story of Chicken Little to her class, and she came to the part of the story where Chicken Little tried to warn the farmer. And she read, and so Little Chicken went up to the farmer and said, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. And then the teacher paused and asked the class, and what do you think the farmer said? And one little girl raised her hand and said, I think he said, holy crap, a talking chicken. The teacher was unable to teach for the next 10 minutes. Or consider language. English is my primary language, as it is, I'm sure, for many of you. And you'd think that the more you immerse yourself in this one language and not get confused by learning others, the better you would understand English. You know, don't distract me with other subjects. Let me concentrate on this one. But that's not quite how it works. When you study a different language and you get out of your own, then you learn to see your language in a way you never could have before. It wasn't until I studied Latin, for example, with its different case endings and verb conjugations, that I could appreciate the simplicity of English, which is a lot less of that. But boy, did I learn how to identify English parts of speech after that. Learning Latin actually helped me understand English. Going there helped me to be here. And I'll never forget one day in our first year Latin class when we came upon this verb, movere, which means to move. That's how we get our word move. Fairly simple. However, we were taught that when it was joined with campum, which means camp, movere campum didn't mean move, it meant break. And we all thought that was weird. And we asked the teacher why it changed meaning when it was used with camp. And he said, I don't know, Latin's just a weird language. But as I thought about it, I realized Latin isn't weird, English is. When we say the soldiers broke camp, what we mean is they started moving the camp. English is breaking camp, Latin says moving camp. I think the Latin way actually is clearer than the English one. And that's one of the first times it occurred to me that the language I speak has a lot of assumptions built into it, which I only saw by stepping outside of it. Studying Hebrew had a similar effect for me. There are some very strange expressions in Hebrew that don't seem to make much sense at first. Take the word off. Hebrew reads from right to left, so this is the A and this is the F. Off can mean nose or nostril. Now that's not too hard to follow. Off for this and for this, pretty close. But off can also mean anger. What? When you read in the Bible about God's anger, it also means God's nose. And when it says that God is slow to anger, What the Hebrew is actually saying is, God is long of nose. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, what can anger and nostrils possibly have in common? And then I realized, anyone want to make a guess? Yeah.
The emotion of breathing deeply when you're upset.
Yes, and your nostrils flare. Your nostrils flare when you get angry. Now, my initial reaction was, of course, that's pretty weird. Hebrew is an odd language. But I realized we have just as weird expressions in English. For example, when someone tries to find out things that aren't their business, we say they are nosy. We say they're nosing around or sticking their nose where it doesn't belong. That wouldn't make sense in a lot of cultures. And if someone is lying, we might say your nose is growing, but you kind of have to have read Pinocchio to get that. Or if someone is angry, we might say, don't get your nose out of joint. Someone of a different language or culture might find our use of nose just as odd as we might find the Hebrew, especially the expression we use for someone who's trying to be ingratiating, brown nose. Ugh. All right. Now that's what's fascinating about learning another language. In doing so, you learn about your own language. Things that seem weird in Hebrew, for example, you discover are no weirder than things in English that you were too close to see before. It gives new understanding to T.S. Eliot's famous lines, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." The late comparative religion scholar, Mircea Eliade, used to cite a Jewish folk tale to make this point to his students. Eliade was a scholar of mythology and comparative religion, much like Joseph Campbell, if you've ever read or seen some of his things. And here's the story he told. Once upon a time, there was a Polish rabbi named Isaac who lived in Krakow. And one night he had a dream that there was a treasure buried underneath a certain bridge in Prague in the Czech Republic. He didn't think about it much, but the next night he had the same dream. And the night after that, he dreamed it again. Well, after the third dream, he decided there must be something to it. So he packed up his belongings and made the long trip to Prague. And when he got there, he found the bridge he had seen in his dream. But he couldn't look for the treasure underneath it because there was a group of soldiers guarding it. And finally, the captain of the soldiers saw him slinking around and said, "What are you doing here?" And Rabbi Isaac didn't want to say anything at first, but the captain threatened him. So he said, "Well, I had a dream, I had this dream that at this bridge there was a treasure of gold buried beneath it." And the captain, when he heard the story, laughed and said, "How foolish you are to have traveled all this way because of a dream. I'll tell you, I had a dream once. It was a dream of treasure, but I didn't waste my time following it. I can't believe how superstitious you are." And Rabbi Isaac asked him, "Well, what was your dream?" And the soldier said, "Oh, long ago I had a dream of a treasure buried back in Krakow, Poland, underneath the stove of a Jew named Isaac. But you don't see me running out to Krakow, do you?" And at that, Rabbi Isaac thanked the soldier for his words of wisdom and left immediately and walked the long journey home. And when he got there, he dug up the earth beneath his stove, and sure enough, there was a chest full of gold. And Mircea Eliade used to say, the point of the story is that your treasure is at home. It's at home, right where you started from. But you have to go on a journey somewhere else in order to find that it's been here under your stove all this time. So, what are the implications of this? Well, for one thing, the most important things you'll ever learn are likely things you already knew, but not in the way you could know until you stepped outside your knowledge base. For another, the answers to most of your problems you also have inside, but you're not likely to find those answers until you see other people with the same problems, and you think, why don't they just? And then you realize, why don't I just? Another implication is that if the answer is in here, maybe the obstacle is in here too. It's not necessarily out there, though it's convenient to think it is. As the Islamic mystic Hazrat Ali once put it, your medicine is in you and you do not observe it. Your ailment is from yourself and you do not recognize it. Or as Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, if you will not know yourself, then you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. Another implication in all this is that your past, present, and future will all get commingled in strange ways. For example, you'll find yourself having an aha experience, but when you think back, you realize that you've had that aha before, only maybe it wasn't as deep an aha. And you'll probably have that aha in the future. And you might think, God, I seem to be going around in circles, learning the same things over and over again. But you're not really, because each time you learn the same thing, it's at a different level, a deeper level. So you're not going around in circles, and you're not going in a straight line. You're going in a spiral, encountering the same questions, touching the same issues, but at a deeper level each time, or on a higher level, if choose your metaphor. And that's why there are such things as Unitarian Universalist congregations. You see, you could come here and hear us tell you that you have divinity within you and think, well, if I already have it within me, why do I need to come to church? The answer lies somewhere in the word educate. Those of you who were or are teachers might already know this, but the word educate comes from the Latin word educare. The E meaning out, usually it's X, but it gets simplified, and ducare meaning to lead. In fact, Mussolini was called El Duce, the leader, so you can see that was based on Latin. Okay, so it means to lead out or to draw out. Now, this is different from pouring something in. To draw out assumes there's something already in there. And that's what we do in this congregation. You don't come here to get divinity poured into you. You come here to have the divinity you've already got drawn out. It's already there. But you might not actually see it if you have no one to draw it out and reflect it for you. So that's what we do in UU congregations. We don't give you something you don't already have. We just help you see it. And we have faith that once you see it, you will live it. And this is actually what good friends do for one another. And this is also what happens in a good marriage. It's not that we need someone else to make us complete, like the song, you were half, now you're whole. It's not that. It's that a friend or partner or congregation can help you find that part of you that you wouldn't have seen on your own. And the last implication here is that if you've been searching for truth or goodness or beauty somewhere else, that's fine, as long as you don't get trapped in exotica. You know, exotica means those things that seem unusual, things that are far away or foreign. The exotic always appears more interesting than what's at hand. Oh yes, the truth must be out there. That's why a speaker from far away always seems more knowledgeable. I see how smart I am. I'm from Racine. We even have an expression for this, the expert from afar. Or as Jesus put it, a prophet is not without honor except in his own home. You know, I sometimes meet people, some of them UUs, who seem to be mainly interested in exotica, that is, things from far away, things that are foreign. Let's say they were raised as Christians and they see all the problems in Christianity, so they think the truth must be somewhere else, maybe in Buddhism. So they jump into Buddhism. But meanwhile, there are people who are raised as Buddhists who are saying, boy, this is a boring religion, or Buddhism is just too weird. Maybe Christianity will have the answers. My point is, It's fine to go searching and look far away and climb the highest mountains and visit far countries and explore exotic cultures and religions. But remember, the truth is here too. As the Confucian teacher Chung Dao Ke put it, the student said, "I came here to find the truth, Master." And the Master replied, "Why wander around and neglect your precious treasure at home?" The student said, "Precious treasure? What do you call my precious treasure?" And the Master replied, "That which asks the question is the treasure." Your treasure is right here. And you may have to go about 30 blocks that way to see it. But once you see it, don't stay out there. Come back and forth and back and forth in the spiraling journey of your life.